How we doing? Today's hearing of the Minnesota Committee on Agriculture, Veterans, Broadband, and Rural Development for Wednesday, March 12th, 2025 is now in session. Folks, we have a very, very busy, packed schedule today. I'm going to briefly go through all the bills we're going to hear. Note that these bills have 10-minute limits on them. So if you're here to testify, I hope you can be efficient. And remember, 10 is a limit, it's not a goal. So if you can be more efficient than that, you'll be very much appreciated. So please, let's do these as they're all important. We want to hear from you, but we also want to make sure we get a chance to hear from everybody. So we are going to switch the order up a little bit. I'm going to start us off by talking about a bill that came from the Veterans Committee, and then we will begin discussion of a lot of our ag-specific bills. Senator Seeberger, Senator Kupek, twice, 3 times, Senator Lang, Senator Dames, Senator Johnson. And then we have a presentation from the University of Minnesota on agriculture research and projects. But members of the public, we have one very important project to do before we begin our agenda. And that's to acknowledge the birthday of Senator Anderson. I think Senator Lang should start the song. All right, everybody. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. A little more feeling and volume. Happy birthday to you.
Mr. Chair, I appreciate that. Sounded a little weak.
Well, now that we got all that goodwill out of the way, I'm going to go present a bill.
Okay, Senator Putnam, to your bill, you have, where's the Senate file? There it is, 1894.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Senate File 1894 is a bill that was discussed in the subcommittee on Veterans Affairs. It puts some reasonable and appropriate expectations toward individuals who profit off of veterans' claims. Disability claims in particular. It builds off the great work started by Senator Anderson in 2017 when his bill started to add extra scrutiny to individuals who are doing this work and adds some new rules and expectations for that behavior. Mr. Chair, I do have an amendment to move, and I want to add before I discuss that amendment that this amendment is part of our effort to continue talking about the issue and refining the bill and its expectations. Like all bits of legislation, this is a work in progress. This amendment is not seen to be seen as final. This bill still needs to evolve and still be worked on a little bit. But the area that we really need to attend to is the very last section on penalties, and that needs to be discussed by the Judiciary Committee. So we need to get this bill to the Judiciary Committee as soon as we can, so they can look at their part and we can keep working on ours. Mr. Chair, with that, I'd like to move the A7 amendment, if I could, please.
Okay, members, Senator Putnam moves the A7 amendment.
Mr. Chair, the A7 amendment removes the language of federal accreditation temporarily, or for now. It removes language of federal accreditation so that we can think about it a little bit more. And instead inserts the language, quote, a person seeking to receive compensation in connection with benefits, and then further rules about those kinds of activities and rules. That's the nature of the amendment, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Members, any discussion here of the A7 amendment? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Putnam,
I don't really see how this is going to change things, but maybe you can explain it further.
Senator Putnam.
Mr. Chair, Senator Anderson, one of the primary stumbling blocks that we're facing here is interaction between sort of federal expectations and rules of the VA. A lot of the behaviors that we're talking about currently are illegal at the federal level, but there is no mechanism for enforcement. One of the things that we were working on by including accreditation was to get that mechanism of enforcement to have effect at the state level. And I would add that New Jersey, for example, just in 2023, passed a law very similar to the one that we have now, unanimous bipartisan support for this bill that is struggling in our body. What this does is by removing the language of federal accreditation makes it much more acceptable to lots of the people who are still concerned and interested in having input on the nature and function of the bill.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you.
Any other members? Senator Westrom.
Mr. Chair, got waylaid by Senator Putnam on the way, so I said you'd be mad at me, so I said I have to get going. But
you missed the singing, Mr.
I did. Just confirming, this is kind of an amendment we had talked about, and would remove the accreditation, give more time for parties to keep working on figuring out more workable language, and that's kind of the recap.
Senator Putnam.
Mr. Chair, Senator Westrom, yes, this is exactly what we've discussed.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, to that end, I appreciate the movement. I hope the parties listening and watching will take it earnestly to really figure out a better dissection or how to work out an accreditation without limiting choice for veterans, as much as the concern has been raised. And so Senator Putnam, I'll plan to support this along the way to help try to work to an end, but appreciate taking this out because I'm not supportive of this language if we don't get it fixed.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Senator Westrom.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Putnam, I appreciate your taking out the accreditation part. There's more to this bill than what meets the eye, so I'm going to be probably a no vote on this, even though with the amendment taking it out. We'll see what happens when we get to judiciary.
Okay. Any other members on the A7 amendment? Okay, seeing no other discussion, all in favor of the A7 amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Same sign. A7 amendment is adopted. Senator Putnam, do you want to move the bill here then too?
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'd like to move that Senate File 1894 as amended be recommended to pass and referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Okay. And with that, all in favor of moving Senate File 1894 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Senate File 1894 as amended is passed and sent to judiciary.
Okay, folks, I forgot to mention that Keely's got a clock. So if things start going a little bit too far, she's going to get mean. So keep a look at her to make sure that we keep things under time, if we could, please. First order of business after that is Senate File 2217, Senator Seeberger, the Minnesota State Horticultural Society Appropriations. Mr. Marquardt, are you here? If you could, please, feel free to have a seat with Senator Seeberger. Senator Seeberger, if you would, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pleased to be here to present Senate File 2217 to this committee. It seeks a very modest appropriation for the Minnesota State Horticultural Society. The Minnesota State Horticultural Society has been helping Minnesota's gardening community for over 150 years by making gardening resources more available and sustainable, providing educational publications, and developing hands-on initiatives. As an avid gardener myself, Mr. Chair and members, I understand how important it is to have robust community resources available when getting started, and this funding helps inspire a healthier, greener, and more sustainable future in Minnesota. The ask is a total of $210,000 from the general fund, $100,000 in 2026, and $110,000 in 2027, and I have here Paul Marquardt, who can tell you a little bit more very briefly about this bill.
Senator Sieber, Mr. Marquardt, if you could state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
My name is Paul Marquardt, and I am a member of the Board of Directors of the Minnesota State Horticultural Society, and I am actually the treasurer of the board. I'm also joined here today by Laura Lau Schomer, who is our executive director, and by Andrew Donsmith, who is the chair of our board. First, I'd like to thank Senator Seeberger and Senator Putnam for their support in co-sponsoring this bill. It's a very meaningful bill to us. And I'd also like to thank the committee for inviting us to join today and to be able to talk to the committee about the bill. We are a 159-year-old organization. Our focus has been on gardening, agriculture, and various types of activities within the state of Minnesota for that time period. It started with the apple and trying to make the apple something that was a more productive crop here in Minnesota, and that's how our efforts have continued since that point in time. We are an organization of approximately 9,700 people, and we have a number of programs, but our signature programs, I would say, are three. One is the quarterly publication, The Northern Gardener, that we put out. A second is Garden in the Box, which is an educational type program which is designed to put boxes with children to allow them to learn how to garden under the mentorship of experienced gardens. And the third program is Minnesota Green, which is designed to help match up where there is excess product in the horticultural industry and placing it out into community gardens. The bill that Senator Seeberger and Putnam are co-sponsoring would be designed to provide support primarily for those latter two programs, the Garden in the Box program and the Minnesota Green program, and designed to try to support expansion of those programs. They already are statewide, but our goal is to try to make them even more broadly available throughout the state and to expand individual participation within areas that are already existing.
Thank you, Mr. Marquardt. Members, do we have questions or comments for Senator Sieber or her testifier? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can someone tell me from fiscal how we funded these people in the past?
Mr. Olofsson.
Mr. Chair, Senator Anderson, for fiscal year 24 and 25, the Minnesota Horticultural Society received $68,000 from the general fund as a one-time appropriation.
So, Mr. Chair,
Senator Anderson.
Will this be an ongoing appropriation then of this bill?
Senator Seeberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill is for fiscal year 26 and fiscal year 27.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Members, other questions, comments? Seeing none, Senator Seeberger, do you have a closing statement?
No final comments, Mr. Chair.
Senate File 2217 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Excellent example you two just set. Well done. Senator Kubek, Senate File 1831, County Agriculture Inspector Grants Appropriation. The bar is high. Mr. Dunning, if you would, please. Senator Kubek to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is, excuse me, Senate File 1831. This has to do with county agriculture or weed inspectors. Noxious weeds are present in a variety of adverse effects on both illness in both humans and livestock, loss of crops, environmental degradation because of species presents are either non-native or out of balance or just aesthetically not pleasing. So this bill will appropriate $2 million in fiscal year 26-27 from the general fund to the Department of Agriculture for county ag inspector grants. The bill specifies that MDA can use up to 3% of the appropriation for administrative costs. The bill additionally specifies that county ag inspectors and county designated employees must annually submit an application to be eligible for the funding, and that MDA must equally divide that amount among the eligible counties.
Thank you, Senator Kubek. Mr. Dunning, if you please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready, and feel free to brag about Stearns County.
Here we go again. Mr. Chair, committee members, my name is Bob Dunning. I am here representing the Association of County Agricultural Inspectors, or Ag Inspectors. So Ag Inspectors, what do? We enforce the Minnesota Noxious Weed Law. We educate citizens on the harmful effects of noxious weeds. We train city and township officials to be local weed inspectors and assist us in trying to keep our respective counties clean. We go with them on weed tours. We also manage biological control programs for noxious weeds, which is using insects to control weeds. We also preside over very problematic cases, and we assist the Department of Agriculture with various other programs. There's also more information about what we do and this proposal in a handout I believe you should have received today. So why does this matter? Weed infestations overrun forests, prairies, wetlands, leading to habitat and pollinator loss, decreased biodiversity, and negative impacts on agriculture. Terrestrial invasive species increase the risk of wildfire, erosion, and flooding, and they decrease recreational appeal and cause economic harm. Each year, millions is spent in this state to mitigate terrestrial invasive species. Thank you for letting me speak today, and I could answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dunning. Members, questions or comments for the author or his testifier? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It says here at the end that the Commissioner of Agriculture must equally divide available grant money among eligible counties. Are all counties then not considered eligible?
Mr. Chair, Senator Anderson, within the bill there are a few requirements that need to be met to receive the grant funding. Their basic job duties, and we feel it's fair that to receive the money that county is performing those basic duties.
So, Mr. Chair.
Senator Anderson.
Can someone tell me who is not eligible? What counties are not eligible for this money?
Senator Kubek.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Anderson. I don't know if I can tell you which counties are not eligible, but I can tell you what you have to do, what you have to have in the county to be eligible. So to be eligible, someone who is there has attended training for new county ag inspectors. So you have to be trained in this, coordinate with MDA to review applicable laws and enforcement procedures, compile and submit to MDA local weed inspector annual reports, conduct an annual meeting and training for local weed inspectors, and assist MDA with control programs. So my hunch is that there's some counties that probably are not meeting these requirements, and they maybe just assign this job to somebody who doesn't have the training. And so I think the goal is to make sure that counties that are complying with MDA are eligible for the grant.
So, Mr. Chair, could someone
Senator
from the Department of Agriculture tell me what counties are not eligible?
If you would, please, when you get up here, state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Mr. Chair, members, my name is Anthony Cordeletta. I oversee the noxious weed program for the state of Minnesota. Great question. All counties are mandated under the old noxious weed law, which is current too, but goes back 100 years to have a county ag inspector. Currently, that's about 50% of counties give a very dedicated response to fulfilling that need. They are the ultimate enforcement authority for weed control. What this grant would do is allow the department to look at the counties that are applying, whether they're meeting their mandates under the actual noxious weed law. And if they are, then they would be entitled to that money. The way I read the law is that if 50 counties apply and meet those requirements, we'd split it up 50 ways. Or if it was all 87, we'd split it up 87 ways.
Senator Anderson?
Lots of ifs. Doesn't sound like all 87 counties are available because they don't meet the requirements. So we're talking 50% of 88, 44, maybe 43 at the most. And that would be interesting to know if this language is going to enhance and make other counties want to be participants in this or not.
Mr. Chair.
Feel free.
No, that's a great point, but I do think that right now we currently, I'm sure the association probably has better numbers, we probably have about, I'd say 68 or so counties that are fulfilling their mandate already under the noxious weed law. It all varies across the board at how much money they spend. But I do think that, just my opinion, that this would be an incentive for counties that don't currently feel like they can meet the mandate to have money to actually give to an employee to get trained and do the work.
So, Mr. Chair.
Senator Anderson.
Have you got any type of examples of counties that don't want to participate?
Mr. Chair, what I would say is there are counties that feel they can do the bare minimum, which is respond to calls when they get complaints from farmers or citizens on noxious weeds. They may follow up, and that's all they do is reach out to a landowner because they're the ditch inspector also, or they're the feedlot inspector, right? They're wearing many hats. On the other hand, Stearns County has a unique example where they still have a full-time inspector here in Bob Dunning, and so that's what he does all day long. And what I would hope this would do is provide incentive to at least, we figured, let's say 87 counties all apply and make the grade, they would each get around $10,000.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lots of ifs and a lot of money that could be or couldn't be distributed. So I'm just concerned. So thank you.
Members of the questions or comments? Senator Dames.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Kupek, could you tell me, have we had set aside money for the county agricultural inspector grants in the past, or is this a new?
Senator Kupek, I recall hearing from...
I know the answer to this.
Yeah,
so I had this bill 2 years ago, and I believe it did not get included in the budget, the last biennium, so we have not done this before.
Thank you.
Members of the questions or comments? Closing statement, Senator Kupek?
No, and thank you, members. Thank you. I think this is one of those things where, you know, the state does require this of all the counties, and we don't give them any funding for it. So in a way, you could view it as an unfunded mandate. So if we could find a little money for it, I think it would be the right and appropriate thing to do.
Thank you, Senator Kupek. Senate File 1831 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Senator Kupek, now we turn to Senate File 2147, Livestock Investment Grant Program Grant Awards Modification. And Ms. Bernhardt, welcome back. Good to see you again. Senator Kupek, I understand you have an amendment.
I do, Mr. Chair.
Hooray!
Yay. I have the A1 amendment.
Senator Kupek moves the A1 amendment. Members, you all should have a chance to take a quick look. Senator Kupek, would you like to describe it at all?
Sure. Just as a couple of things, there's a kind of a quick little change of the word from person to eligible applicant. Changes a dollar amount on a different line that we realized things did not divide out correctly when we did it, so we changed that. And then took some input from the Department of Agriculture in terms of what exactly we would like to describe in the bill as what livestock is, instead of a long list of this animal and that animal and whatever. It just puts it more in for things that are in production of fiber, meat, or animal byproducts.
Thank you, Senator Kupek. Ms. Bernhardt, if you would please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Putnam and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Hannah Bernhardt, and I'm a diversified livestock farmer in Finlayson, Minnesota, in Pine County. I'm a member of Climate Land Leaders, the Land Stewardship Project, and the Minnesota Farmers Union, and on behalf of myself and these organizations, I'd like to share my strong support for the proposed modifications to the Livestock Investment Grant. I raise grass-fed beef and lamb and pastured pork using regenerative grazing practices, and I direct market my products to customers throughout northeastern and east central Minnesota. I started Medicine Creek Farm in 2016 after taking the Land Stewardship Project's Farm Beginnings training course. It prepared me to start my operation by teaching me how to approach the Farm Service Agency for a startup loan and apply for available grants through the Department of Agriculture. My FSA startup loan was for $20,000 to purchase livestock, portable fencing, a four-wheeler, and a trailer to haul water. And I'm happy to report I paid it off last year. However, as a beginning farmer, I was only able to buy 160 acres of land to start on, and I could only afford that many acres because it came with zero infrastructure. So as I was looking to invest in much-needed infrastructure for the farm, such as a loading corral, sorting equipment, a cattle squeeze chute, a livestock trailer, and a pole shed, I repeatedly looked at the Livestock Investment Grant as an option to help me get my business off the ground. However, all of these purchases I was looking to make were under $4,000, which is currently the minimum project size you can apply for under the grant. Furthermore, the grant currently only covers 10% of project costs. So even if I had combined all of my projects to reach the minimum, I would have been looking at a $400 grant. When I weighed the amount of time it would take me to gather quotes, create a budget, and fill out the grant application, that size grant didn't seem worth my time when I had many other things to do around the farm. And when it comes to the building projects, I also didn't think I would have the time within the busy growing season to complete both projects in the required timing of the grant cycle. Plus, I would still need to come up with another $3,600 or spend additional time applying for another Farm Service Agency loan. So I'll be honest that I've felt pretty frustrated about this grant over the years. And while I've completed some of those projects I mentioned on my own, I still don't have a proper loading corral. I believe all livestock farmers are worth investing in, and we desperately need more livestock on the land to improve soil health and natural nutrient cycling to make us more climate resilient. But unfortunately, this grant is mostly only helping the largest producers with building projects, and beginning farmers aren't even really bothering to apply. While my livestock operation is considered small, my impact on my local community and economy is large. I started small because I had to, and because I was making a sound financial decision to not take on more debt than I could afford. But I work just as hard, 365 days a year in all weather, to raise healthy, high-quality, nutrient-dense meat. I've grown my business to 6 figures, and each year I now feed over 100 Minnesota families, often the entirety of the meat they will eat in that year. So in conclusion, I very much appreciate that the Department of Agriculture has recognized the need for the proposed changes, and I strongly encourage passage of Senator Kupek's bill. Thank you for your time and your work supporting farmers, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bernhardt. As some of you probably noticed, I made a procedural error in that we neglected to actually vote on the amendment before we heard your testimony. I'm not going to ask you to do your testimony again, but I am going to ask us all to briefly vote on the amendment, if we could, the author's amendment, Senator Kupek's author's amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay. Bill is amended. Now, thank you again for your testimony, Ms. Bernhardt. And Senator Kupek, do you have other comments you'd like to make about the underlying bill, or should we begin our discussion?
Sure, we can begin our discussion.
Members, questions or comments for Senator Kupek's Senate File 2147 as amended? Senator Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding now that we've put in this amendment, an eligible applicant then has to meet these new qualifications that are put in there, the 50% of the 20,000. Am I correct in saying that's the new requirement in order for them to be considered for this money?
Senator Kupek?
Yes, Mr. Chair, and yes, Senator Anderson. In the bill, that is what it is. The amendment just changed the other one, the 20%, because the math didn't work out right.
And Mr. Chair.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Kupek. So the commissioner makes the final decision on who gets the award, and what does he base that on other than this language here? I mean, if you have many applicants for that, you've only got 200,000, or how much money you got?
Senator Kubek?
Yes, on the fiscal note on the, I'm not sure what the fiscal note is on it. The total amount of the grants.
Maybe a little bit more clarity on the question, Senator Anderson. Could you rephrase the question?
Well, I'm wondering how much money is available for the Commissioner of Agriculture, and then how many applicants, and based on what is the applicant going to be decided? Because if there's 50 or 100, you know, you've only got a limited amount. So what does the physical note say about how much money the commissioner has to be able to distribute, and then based on what does he make or she make that decision on?
It looks like we've got a friend from the Department of Agriculture here to help us out a little bit. Could you state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready, please?
For the record, my name is Courtney Vandermay, Chair Putnam, Senator. It's based on a review committee. So in the last round, we had 141 applications. A review committee of farmers, people in the industry, come to score these based on a scoring rubric. That scoring rubric is put out by the Department of Ag based on needs of the industry. So yeah, there is a scoring rubric. Applications are scored. There's a review committee.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to the testifier, it says here the commissioner may award. Doesn't mean it has to. So what does the commissioner, what is the details of how he makes his final decision, or she makes that final decision on, say that we said 150 applicants? And how much is it? Is it $200,000 that we're talking about?
Ms. Vandermay.
Chair, Senator, last year we had $1.3 million available for this grant. So the review committee scores the applications, and their recommendations are brought to the commissioner for the final say. So the commissioner does have the final say of those recommendations.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chair, to the testifier, so are you looking at $1.3 million again for this coming biennium?
Ms. Vandermay.
The livestock, Chair, Senator, this program is typically from undesignated funds, so the flexibility in the Agri program is what provides the funding for this program.
Senator Anderson.
From the Agri program. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Senator Westrom.
Mr. Chair, Courtney's there from the Department of Agriculture. I heard you say you have was 141 applicants last year. How many of those did you award to use up the funds?
Ms. Vandermay.
Chair, Senator, currently we're in contracting, so the unofficial number is roughly 60 some for fiscal year 25, so we are still in process. But typically it ranges between 60 to 70 grantees per fiscal year.
Okay.
Senator Westrom.
So, Mr. Chair, Courtney, are they are those grants resubmitted a year later if they didn't get covered the prior year? I'm assuming so, but I'll mix this into your question as well. Can you talk a little bit about what the criteria you use to decide which grants you're funding? Because the whole idea here is to encourage more livestock and upgrading buildings for families transitioning to their children. And if we're already getting grants and good proposals 2-to-1 of what we have for funding, can you talk a little bit about what it is you use for criteria to decide and who do you fund? Are the last 60 or 80 projects you don't fund, do they kind of fail and not meet the test, or is it that they're just not quite as good? They don't maybe bring as much livestock activity to the state, or what do you use for criteria?
Ms. Vandermay.
Chair, Senate committee members, could be a generational transition, could be a beginner farmer. We have some scoring related to the environment. There's robotic dairy in that scoring rubrics. Trying to, off the top of my head, those are the things that come to mind, but it's out of 100 points. So there is, applicants are trying to maximize their points in that.
Okay. So, Mr.
Senator
Chair,
Westrom.
so I understand there's different things, and so if maybe you were building a dairy barn and adding robotics for your livestock, for your milking, you might get more points than if you were just expanding your dairy barn, or would they kind of both be weighted the same, just in that example?
Ms. Vandermeer.
Chair, Senator, it is based on how the application is filled out. I do want to say that sorry, I lost my train of thought. But no, it is dependent on how the application is filled out. The application does ask for a budget narrative, quotes.
Thank you, Ms. Vandermeer. Senator Westrom.
So, Mr. Chair, Senator Kupik, I'm wondering if, where did you come up with the idea of 50% of $20,000? So the first $30,000 of the investment, the state's going to put in 10,000 of that, and then a higher level up to 220,000. I've got some concerns with those percentages. Where did they come at from you? And if we're already using up the program, which is tried to be a small incentive to help encourage more livestock expansion or updates and transition to farms, do we really need to go to this high of a percentage when the program's already receiving a lot of interest?
Senator Kupek.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator Westrom. I think the idea here of changing the percentage around is, as the testifier exemplified, we're looking at getting maybe some of those smaller people who are really starting out that could really use a hand up, and at the lower amount, the percentage just wasn't enough for them to even be worthwhile. So this helps out some of those smaller ones. It also helps in that idea of, particularly, diversifying out or can have more livestock grown in local places. I think it really helps some of those smaller producers make big changes to then eventually make their operations a little larger.
Ms. Vandermeer.
Chair, Senator, I do want to make a comment towards those larger projects. There is a benefit to them. There is a fair amount of paperwork involved in doing those grants to be reimbursed by the state for this program. So the amount of receipts they would have to submit to the department to get that $25,000 is reduced, so they could receive that grant funding a little bit easier with a little less paperwork if this was lowered. So there is that benefit to them if they would spend $95K, or I might have my numbers, but they're spending, those larger projects are still benefiting. They still would receive that $25K. So I don't want to hinder the large projects, but it is beneficial to those smaller projects. We could fund a more significant amount of those smaller projects.
Senator Westrom.
Mr. Chair.
Sure. Senator Westrom.
So, Mr. Chair, Senator Kupik, I'm wondering if you'd be amenable to maybe changing those percentages at all. And Mr. Chair, I'll be happy to listen to other discussion in the meantime. But Senator Kupik, I guess I'm just thinking, as we're trying to stretch dollars here, we don't want to get in a situation where maybe there's programs lucrative and really not accomplishing what it's set out to do, which I remember when the livestock investment grant was kind of pushed by Representative Erdahl back in the day, and it was intended to be kind of just a small help to expand or bring more livestock into the state. And so if we shrink that, we're going to get less livestock potentially, and yet the money will still go out the door quicker. I get what we're trying to do is find that sweet spot. I just have a little concern with 50% right up front on that much money. At some point, we want, fairly serious skin in the game, and before we have those dollars go out the door, you have projects that are well-intended and then they fail. That we can talk about some of them that is in recent history, or child care program that's turns out that a lot of it's going to projects that don't really do what we're trying to accomplish. And I just want to find that sweet spot, I guess. Are you open to maybe a modified percentage I get maybe the bigger percentage up front on some of it, but 50% just seems a little high to me, but happy to have some more discussion, Mr. Chair.
Senator Kupek.
If Senator Kupek wants to respond first.
Sure. Actually, I would like to, could I defer and defer to the person that has actually kind of done the math and come up with this idea for this, so.
Ms. Kenevi, if you could please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Teresa Caveney from New Ulm with Climate Land Leaders. Senator Westrom, Mr. Chair, the percentage of 50% on the first 20,000 and 20% on the next 200,000 is projected actually to still serve a lot of farmers. In my testimony, or I should say in the comments that we submitted, we gave some scenarios. Actually, it came from the department to sort of show how it could be spread out more with more smaller producers. As far as being open to change the percentage, my organization would be, I would be happy to chat with you about what that would look like, chat with Senator Kupek and the department. I think the department suggested the percentages in part because of feedback they had received from applicants as well as people who didn't apply. And they apparently discussed this with some of the other livestock groups as well. A couple of weeks ago, I was here and we had a presentation from the turkey growers and we saw the laser, and Ms. Coles indicated it cost $17,000 to $20,000. This kind of, but that is cost prohibitive for some people, and we truly want to reduce avian flu and do what we can to bolster the health of our poultry business, our poultry industry. This grant at that alternate level, I think would jumpstart that as well and would help those kinds of operations. One other thing I just wanted to note, this also, as amended, would allow tribal governments to apply. Some tribes are embarking upon livestock operations to raise bison and other livestock to feed their tribe, just to feed their people, and this amends the law to allow that to happen. Lastly, the percentage of the grant is really for us a little bit of an update to align more with a lot of the various sizes and matches of other MDA programs. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Thank you very much for that useful context, Ms. Kennedy. Senator Westrom, any final statements? Sure.
I'm good for now.
Oh, thank you, Senator Westrom. Senator Dames.
Thank you, but I got my question answered.
Thank you all. Any other final comments or questions for Senator Kupek? Final statement?
Sure.
No.
Oh, sorry. Oh, Senator Westrom.
If nobody else, I'd have another question or two.
Oh, sure, Senator Westrom.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, what is the plan for this bill? Is it just being heard and held over for possible inclusion?
Yes, Senator Westrom, that's the plan.
Okay. So, Senator Kupek, in anticipation of this, I had prepared an amendment, and I guess if others had thoughts on it, but would you be more, I'm wondering if maybe a 25% match would be better on the first 40,000 and then stick with the 10% up to the 500 that we have now to kind of help get that front end loaded a little more. Is that anything that you'd be open to if we offered it before we laid it over, or else is it something we could continue to discuss? I'd be open. I lay it out there, Mr. Chair, gently. If other members have some comments on it first, I'd move it if there's a way we could work something out too, but just wanting to start the discussion.
Senator Kupek, the question to you, I think, is would you entertain an amendment, or would you like to continue working on this with Senator Westrom outside the committee?
I think I'd like to continue working on it because I'd also just like to bring in MDA on the conversation because they're the ones that administer this and they would probably know more than I do on this. So I'm more than open to those suggestions. I think I just want one more person at the table to have this conversation.
Sure. Senator Westrom, is that acceptable to you?
Yeah, and Mr. Chair, knowing that, I'd go with the whole offering the A2 amendment, but I think I've already made it public, so Senator Kupek can get a copy of it and we can continue discussing it. And other committee members, I'd be interested in I'm trying to find maybe is there just a little better balance or sweet spot? Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Westrom. Seeing no other comments, Senator Kupek, your final statement.
Nope, just thank you for considering it, and I think these are all just, in this same vein of, trying to help out some of our smaller producers and get them to become eventually larger producers.
Thank you, Senator Kupek. Senate File 2147 as amended will be laid over for possible inclusion. Up next, we have Senate File 1770, Senator Kupek, the Northern Crops Institute Grants Appropriation. Mr. Bohm, please take a seat. Senator Kupek, if you could, tell us a little bit about the bill.
Sure. This one should probably look familiar to you. This is something I think comes back every year for some, every biennium at least, for some appropriation. This gives $60,000 each year in the biennium to the MDA to be used as a pass-through for the Northern Crops Institute. This appropriation has been made each of the last several bienniums, never been part of the base budget, so it's introduced every year, every time as a separate bill. The Northern Crops Institute is a collaborative effort among Minnesota, Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota to support the promotion and market development of crops grown in this four-state region. The NCI is an international meeting and learning center that brings together customers, commodity traders, technical experts, and processors for discussion, education, and technical services. It is on the campus of North Dakota State University, which may seem a little weird for somebody funding something from Minnesota, but if you talk to any of the producers, particularly up in the Red River Valley, it has been a huge asset to those on even our side of the Red River. The NCI mission is to support regional agriculture and value-added processing by conducting educational and technical programs that expand and maintain domestic and international markets. I was lucky enough last winter to attend one of their groups that they had brought in from a whole bunch of people from all over the world to Fargo in the middle of winter to share and make relations with and expand also the trade within our area. So it does a great organization. Plus, just everybody, any farmer you talk to up there, this is an important asset to them.
Thank you, Senator Kupek. Mr. Bohm, if you'll please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready, and we'll forgive you for being from North Dakota.
Well, thank you, Chairman Putnam and members of the committee. My name is David Boehm, and I have the pleasure of serving as the director of the Northern Crops Institute in my testimony in support of SF 1770. So the NCI was started by North Dakota Century Code in 1979, yet our mission is to promote the commodities that are grown in the four-state region. So right from the beginning, we were considered a collaborative organization to support North Dakota, Minnesota, South Dakota, and Montana, because the commodities that we grow cross the borders. Of course, we're talking about oil seeds and cereal grain crops, pulse crops, and those commodities, of course, cross the state line. So everything that we do is in support of all of the regional agriculture, regardless of what state they're from. The NCI is governed by the Northern Crops Council, and our membership is from the commodity groups, again, from that four-state region, including Minnesota Wheat Research and Promotions Council, and our current chairman, Mr. Tim Dufault, Minnesota Soybean Research and Promotion Council, the Northern Pulse Growers Association, and the Minnesota Corn Growers Association. Remaining seats then rotate with additional commodity group members and related ag industry members across those four states. So representatives from over 155 countries have visited NCI since our establishment in 1979. And last year alone, we had 71 countries part of our programming. That come to this region, visit with our farmers from our marketplace, visit with the commodity groups, and then also our value-added processors. So every 2 years, the NCI determines its impact to our agriculture by surveying past course participants and our technical clients. You have a copy of our impact statement in front of you. I am pleased to report that in 2022 and 2023, 61% of the global attendees have increased the volume purchases of the U.S. commodities as a result of NCI programs. Our courses target the quality of our commodities, their utilization, and specifically how they get those commodities back to their home country. Our technical services have resulted in increased commodity and ingredient purchase activity by over 38%. Our staff works directly with ingredient suppliers and food manufacturers on the utilization of our regional commodities in pasta production, snack food products, all breads and bakery products, soy foods, and oilseed extraction, and particularly, as of late, sustainable airline fuel development. We know that the impact is measured by more than the number of participants in our courses, webinars, online programs, or the number of the private food companies that we support. So we are confident that verifying this increased purchase of commodities and ingredients shows our true impact. Senate File 177070 has a funding request of $60,000 each year within the biennium, and these funds have traditionally been used to cover the salaries of some of our Minnesota employees. Our impact statement shows real and significant economic return on the investment this legislature has made to our efforts. So in closing, Chairman Putnam, members of the committee, the Northern Crops Institute is proud of the work that we do to connect international and domestic customers to Minnesota farmers, commodity groups, and value-added processors. We appreciate your consideration of this funding request, and I'm happy to stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boehm. Members, questions, comments? Seeing none, Senator Kupek, do you have a closing statement?
I think this is one of the biggest bang for our bucks that we can get for such a small amount of money. I think Minnesota makes out really well in this arrangement.
Thank you, Senator Kupek. As long as we do better than North Dakota, that's really the issue.
We're doing better at their help on this one.
Senate File 1770 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Next order of business, Senate File 305, Senator Lang, meat, poultry, egg, and milk processing facilities appropriation. Mr. Sobocinski, if you're here as well, if you could please take a seat. And Senator Lang, when you're ready, to your bill.
Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you for allowing me the time and the opportunity to present what I consider, Mr. Chair, I've had several bills in front of you this year, single paragraphs. It's actually quite astonishing, but it does represent a rather large portion. Minnesota is a very highly productive ag region. This particular bill and the grant process that we have established in the past has been rather fundamental to not only producing ag products, but processing them. So really what Senate File 305 does is it appropriates $1.25 per year in the next biennium to facilitate startup, modernization, expansion of meat, poultry, egg, and milk processing facilities. Last biennium, we also did the ag omnibus bill. If you remember, it was $1.25 per year for the same purposes. So the base of this set is $250 per year going forward. So this is a push above and beyond that. We have been very consistent in that in the past, and like that we have been trying to secure funds in multiple different areas across the board for processing facilities in the state of Minnesota. They have faced unique challenges when it comes to not only startup and modernization, but also trying to abide by clean water quality standards. And of course, that is kind of one of my key priorities for this session is to continue this funding stream. So with that, Mr. Chair, the expert that I have with me today, Mr. Paul Sobocinski. I was close. With the Minnesota Farmers Union, I appreciate him coming today and talk about some specifics. So with that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Lang. Mr. Sobocinski, it's good to see you again. If you could, state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Senator. Appreciate the opportunity to testify here today. For the record, my name is Paul Sobocinski. I'm testifying here with the Minnesota Farmers Union in strong support of Senator Lang's bill to fund the MDA meat, poultry, egg, and milk processing grant, Senate File 305. I have raised hogs on my farm and cattle by Wabasso, Minnesota since 1976. And as a livestock farmer, I know the importance of local processing. Local processing helps in building connections with the end consumer, also helps earn a premium for what farmers produce, keeping more dollars in the local economy. This issue, along with significant challenges that faced our food supply chain during COVID-19, is what inspired me and another organizing group of people to do a research project looking at this issue of small meat processing. We did this in conjunction with the Regional Sustainable Development Partnership at the University of Minnesota that helped us with some initial funding to kickstart this and has helped us for the last 3 years. With that Regional Sustainable Development Partnership, we have a graduate student working in our program and our efforts. Through that almost 60 interviews that we did with small meat processors, we found a couple pieces relevant to this conversation. First, processors highlighted the needs for grants that help not just with startup, but also modernization and expansion of existing plants. Plant upgrades can help make labor easier, improve humane handling, and improve packaging, which helps open new sales channels for farmers. Our existing meat lockers are an asset, and we are well served by ensuring they're be updated and competitive. I'm proud of the work that this committee and Minnesota has led, from supporting high schoolers in learning about meat cutting, opening and funding new training opportunities, expanding our inspection staff, for example, hiring a meat processor navigator to work with regulatory compliance, and other items, such as farm to school. And as MDA's longstanding and flagship grant program continues to support processors, this is a foundation investment to maintain and build forward and be ongoing. And since money is tight, I did want to take the opportunity also to put in a plug for Senator Kuplik's bill to make Agri a dedicated account in Senate File 1172. With no new money invested, this would allow that fund to grow interest. And if any projects fall through, that money would return the programs to programs which is possible through Agri. So, and I also want to say a special thank you to my senator, Senator Dames, for being a co-author on this. This takes cooperation along all party lines. It's important to farmers, and it's important work going forward. The Minnesota Association of Meat Processors, MAP, at their January 23rd board meeting, indicated their strong support for meat processing grants and for full funding for Agri. I hope this also earns a hearing soon. Thank you, Senator Lang, for your longstanding support of this important program. And on behalf of myself and Minnesota Farmers Union, I'm glad to share strong support for this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Sobozinski. Members, questions for Senator Lang or his testifier? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the bill, it says, and may be used for other purposes. My question is was the, and it's being limited now to $200,000 per grant, was the $200,000 that was, and I'm guessing it was allocated in the last biennium, similarly, was that all used for the expansion of meat, poultry, egg, and milk, or was there leftover monies that were used for other purposes? Because it doesn't specify what the other purposes are in the bill. And so, and it was mentioned by the testifier, something about farm to school. So I'm just wondering if that's another purpose, Senator Lang. Maybe you have the background on that.
Senator Lang.
Mr. Chair and Senator Anderson, I believe in the bill that when it does state used for other purposes, that the defining characteristic in that sentence is that it is used under this section. So if there's something that we fail to meet in the definition within the bill, I see the department sneaking up here too. So but I believe that that's why it's said that way. For example, in my district, we have a meat processing educational facility located at Ridgewater that was, I believe it was 2 years ago that we stood that up, and is now producing students. So that is not defined specifically within this bill, but it would apply, is the way I read it, and I don't.
Sure. Senator Anderson.
Well, I see we have a testifier up here that maybe can give me some more clarification.
If you'll state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Senator Anderson. For the record, my name is Ashley Bress. I work as the Assistant Director of Ag Marketing and Development at the department. What this is referring to, or just to back up just a little bit, this $200,000 provision just makes it clear that any single grant that we award out of this $1.25 million cannot exceed $200,000. This next line about the unencumbered balance just means if at the end of the biennium we have not been able to use the entire 1.25 million on livestock processing grants, it would be available for any other purpose under Agri. This section here would be a part of the Agri program just as it was this last biennium. For context, in fiscal year 24, we received about $3.9 million in requests and spent just over $1.25 million. So in that case, there wouldn't be any money to carry over into the next biennium to use for other purposes. But if the grants did come in under that $1.25 million, then those funds could just be used for any other Agri program in the next biennium.
So, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Anderson.
To the testifier, you used all the money that was given in the last biennium for the specific purposes that you had.
Ms. Bress.
Mr. Chair, Senator Anderson, I don't have the fiscal year 25 numbers in front of me, but traditionally we are able to spend the full amount during the biennium. Just in the unlikely chance that we are not able to, we would be able to use the money the following.
Thank you. Members, any other questions or comments? Senator Seeberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Lang, I was in judiciary earlier, and I confess sometimes my mind wanders, and as I was perusing Facebook, I saw a post that you made that said that Minnesota's $6 billion budget shortfall is the product of an almost 40% increase in spending and failed leadership from the Waltz administration and Democrat-controlled Senate and House. You said Minnesotans sent a clear message last November, stop the wasteful spending, but Democrats refused to listen, and now hardworking families are left to pay for that fiscal irresponsibility. I note that you have already presented before this committee a bill, Senate File 303, that includes a blank appropriation and requires MDA to develop a Minnesota-made fertilizer program. You've submitted Senate Files 304 and 302 asking for $10 million. You now come to the committee asking for $2.5 million, and my question is, Senator Lang, is this wasteful spending?
Senator Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Seeberger. No, I don't believe it is.
Senator Seeberger.
Thanks.
Members, other questions or comments? Senator Westrom.
Senator Seeberger, do you think this is wasteful spending?
No, I don't. I believe in ag programs, and I believe in funding things that need to be funding. But it strikes me as peculiar, Senator Westrom and Chair Putnam, that we have a senator before us who now has made asks of this committee to, over $10 million and who has criticized the past spending by the legislature for other things, similar programs to this. So I'm pointing out a discrepancy in my mind that exists between a post that was made not 1 hour ago criticizing spending made by the legislature with a senator who now has come before this committee asking for over $10 million. That's all I'm pointing out.
Senator Dames.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Putnam and Senator Seeberger. There's 67 senators at $10 million, be $670 million. And let me tell you, $670 million is a long cry for $39.5 billion. And I don't think this is a point to have the discussions, but if you want to have them, we can sure have them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Members, I'll give it back to Senator Westrom just really quickly, but we're not going to go down this path for forever. I think Senator Seeberger made her point. Senator Westrom, if you would. Thank you. Okay. Members, any other questions or comments? Okay. Senator Lang, your closing comments, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do appreciate the time, as always, and I do believe this is a very important issue. We do come to this body to spend money and make policy, of course. When it comes to what we spend in a biennium, I think that there's a checkbook that the state of Minnesota has. Right now, that checkbook's in the hole. We spend too much money. That is my personal opinion. I apologize for that coming into play today in front of you, but I think this is, I don't want this bill or this idea or this process that we've invested in the past to become a casualty of political infighting by any means. So With that, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the time.
Senator Westrom.
Mr. Chair, I do have just one question, Senator Lang, and maybe the department, but Senator Lang, do we have any record from the department, has this grant program been abused? Has there been fraud that's been found that hasn't gone to what it's supposed to go to and hasn't built projects? If you know anything on that, or maybe the department can shed some light, because I know that has been a problem. I brought it up on an earlier bill, but maybe we should just get that on the record to make sure that this program doesn't have a history of some of the waste that we've become aware of in state government.
Senator Westrom, I appreciate the question. I think it's a valid one. I do hope that we would be consistent and ask that of every project, perhaps, but we do have Senator Valba here to provide an answer. Sorry, I promoted you or demoted you? I'm not quite sure if that was a blessing or a curse. But Commissioner Valba, if you would please respond.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair and Senator Westrom. Yeah, so we take great pride in our overview of grants. So we just went through a very successful audit through the OLA for several of our grant programs. So we actually go above and beyond what's required for the Office of Administrative, or what the Department of Administration requires for the Office of Grants Management. So I'm quite confident that there was no rampant fraud happening within this program.
Okay. And Mr. Chair, just follow up, Ms. Valba, the money that goes out, does it go out once we know that the project is going to happen? Does it go out and then we hope it happens and then it maybe doesn't? Can you just give us a little bit of comfort on the process and when the recipients would get the money, and how do we know it actually is building milk processing or some other livestock processing or purpose it was intended for? Commissioner Valba.
Mr. Chair and Senator Westrom, so we do our grants on a reimbursement basis, so there has to be proof of purchase, and we do also do site visits to ensure that what they've said they've purchased has been purchased.
Senator Westrom.
Thank you, Ms. Valba. I think that's helpful to know for the committee.
Seeing no further questions, Senate File 30, I'm sorry, Senate, you did today, sorry, Senate File 305 will be laid over for possible inclusion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members.
Senate File 1805 is what's next on the docket. Senator Dames, if you would please, and Mr. Dvorak, if you would please come to the desk. Senator Dames, to your bill when you're prepared.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members, for hearing Senate File 1805 for possible inclusion. Before I get into the bill, I would just like to state that this is going to probably be the lowest cost bill in the entire session this year. The appropriation is for the Minnesota Livestock Breeders Association, and we're asking for $18,000 in fiscal year 2026 and $18,000 in fiscal year 2027. Minnesota Livestock Breeders Association is made up of approximately 2,500 breeders of livestock in Minnesota, with species including beef cattle, dairy cattle, draft horses, swine, sheep, goats, and poultry. This state money is used to support the livestock youth of Minnesota. And with that, Mr. Chair, if it's okay with you, we could have the testifier speak.
Thank you, Senator Dames. Mr. Dvorak, if you could please state your full name for the record and commence your testimony when you're ready.
John Dvorak. Thank you, Chairman Putnam and members of the committee. My bill is simple, and I'm not going to waste a lot of time here, and I'm going to keep my remarks brief. We are asking for this $18,000 over the next 2 years. Simply, it supports our administrative costs that we incur with our organization. It goes to paying salaries of our executive directors, office supplies, and so forth. The Minnesota Livestock Breeders Association, as Mr. Chair said, you know, we include registered purebred breeders, and we support them as much as we can. Our main focus, though, is with the youth, and all of our fundraising that we have happen with our organization takes place at the state fair, and that's done through our dairy showcase and our blue ribbon auction. The Blue Ribbon auction last year netted over $1.2 million. Of that money, 80% of it went back to the exhibitors that sold in the auction, and the other 20% went to support programs that we support through the Breeders Association. And 140,000 of that went to scholarships to different individuals that applied for scholarships. Another $85,000 of that went to a different organization that requested funding. And of that funding alone, $65,000 went to the 4-H program here in Minnesota to pay for various programs that we support. Through the scholarships that we give out, we encourage all of these individuals that apply for scholarships to apply to scholarships and apply to colleges here in the state of Minnesota. But we've been finding out over the past years that a lot of these students want to go to different colleges that suit their needs more, so we opened it up that they could go to the 5 states surrounding Minnesota to use this scholarship money. You know, it instills a lot of respect and a lot of gratitude from these individuals, and it builds character. We had a scholarship that was awarded to an individual several years ago, that decided at the last minute he got a scholarship from a college in Kansas, and on his own he came to our committee and says, I want to give this money to somebody else that's deserving of it here in the state of Minnesota or beyond. So it builds character. Along with what we provide to our individuals and our youth, we also help build projects at the Minnesota State Fairgrounds. You know, the Miracle of Birth, that was money that was donated from Minnesota Livestock Breeders. The Compeer Arena was donated money from the Breeders Association. The Miracle of Birth building, the Moo Build, those are all buildings that our organization sponsored. And our biggest reason is we believe in youth. We believe in planting the seed that by encouraging youth with these scholarships, that they'll invest in farming and they'll continue in the agricultural industry. So with this, I will close. I thank you for all the money that you have supported us in the past years, and I hope that it will continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dvorak. Senator Dames, or Mr. Dvorak, I have a question for you. Just for my own clarification, this $18,000 is purely for administrative purposes?
Correct.
Mr. Dvorak, can you tell us what percentage that is of your general budget?
Oh, I'm
a ballpark?
A ballpark, probably, you know, I'd be redundant to tell you that, but I can get back to you with that information.
I'm not trying to get you.
Yeah, I know. I just want to make it that it's not a ballpark figure, but I like it to be accurate.
Sure.
And I will get back to you on that.
Senator Dames?
Well, Mr. Chair, if you look just in the one auction, they raised $1.2 million. So if 18,000 per year, and they're raising just in that 1.2 million, you're probably about 1% or less.
I understand that point, Senator Dames, but that might be what they raised in a particular moment, but that's not necessarily their operating budget. And what I was interested in is the ratio between the administrative budget and the general operating costs of your budget. And I raised that because it's a question that comes up quite frequently in other committees about that ratio of how much does it take to do the work and how much does it take to help you do the work is a question that comes up quite frequently. So that's the reason why I just wanted a little bit more clarification on that. Members, do you have other questions or comments for the author or his testifier?
I don't have it all together. You could get it, right? I can get it.
Thanks very much, folks. Senator Dames, do you have any closing statements?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Mr. Dvorak will get that number for you so that we have that for the future use. And thank you much, and thank you for your consideration, members.
Thank you. So Senate File 1805 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Senator Johnson, Senate File 2137. To your bill when you're ready, Senator Johnson.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, thank you for the opportunity to come in and present Senate File 2137. This is a bill that I've been carrying, I think, since I came in the first session in 2017. deals with research grant dollars for turf seed up in northwest Minnesota. When we think of agriculture in northwest Minnesota, you think a lot of sugar beets, corn, wheat, soybeans, that sort of thing. You typically don't think about grass seed, but that is a major industry in the state, in particular northwest Minnesota. And so they are doing research up there near Roseau, and quite a facility that they're doing research there. Hopefully one day we'll find the holy grail, figure out seed that will actually grow, or grass will actually grow in the shade. That's our hope and dream. But right now they do have quite a few different blends that are used, not just in the state, but across the country, and really an economic driver up there. What this is asking for is $75,000 a year annual appropriation to the Minnesota Turf Seed Council to apply to basic research on grass seed and turf seed across the industry there. With that, I'll keep it brief, but I'd like to turn it over to my testifier, Mr. Clavin, to talk a little bit more about the turf seed industry in this particular bill.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. Mr. Clavin, if you please, state your full name for the record and commence testimony when ready.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Bruce Clavin. I represent the Minnesota Turf Seed Council today. And I'm pinch hitting because Marv Zutz, the executive director, was unable to be here. So I normally like to ad lib and not read scripts, but I do have his remarks here that I'll read for you without trying to bore you to death. Again, I like to ad lib. So Marv, this is for you if you're watching. Turf Seed Council is comprised of farmers, processors, and businesses who represent the turf seed industry in northwest Minnesota. The grass seed industry in northern Minnesota has a long history of turf seed development. In fact, the first funding for them came from the IRRB in 1948, $35,000. And that investment helped them build the park variety of Kentucky bluegrass back then. And the development of that variety led to others: Timothy, red clover, bird's foot, trefoil, and perennial ryegrass. Those were all developed in the ensuing years. 50 years later, 1998, the University of Minnesota received a gift of 40 acres from an individual named Mrs. Peggy Magnuson. It was the Magnuson Research Farm. And she just simply gave 40 acres to this project at that time. And it was for a permanent research farm out in Roseau, in Senator Johnson's district, as he mentioned. The U of M and the Northern Forage Turf Seed Advisory Board, which is now known as the Minnesota Turf Seed Council, built a structure on the farm that houses the equipment and the office space. And it also has offices for the Minnesota Crop Improvement Association. Production of the seeds is very environmentally friendly, obviously. Some of these species are perennials and produce seed for 4 to 5 years. Consequently, the soil is not disturbed for years, and there is growth all the growing season to prevent nutrient runoff, which I know is near and dear to this committee. In fact, Senator Seeberger, this could be considered the original Forever Green precursor to that initiative. The seed from the fields goes to solve all sorts of problems, from native restoration to levee stabilization and so forth. The perennial ryegrass has had 1,000 acres in 2001, has grown steadily each year, and now is up to 60,000 acres. Questions remain on production, and the Turf Seed Council is there to answer those questions. And in closing, Mr. Chairman, he's listed 4 things that they would use the funding for: to continue to develop unique varieties and germplasm for seed production. Number 2 is to develop turf grass, forage grasses and legumes and end-use environments that differ from the seed-producing region. Number 3 is to develop efficient, economical, and sustainable seed production systems through the improved management of weeds, diseases, insects. That's an ongoing problem all over ag, of course. And number 4, evaluate the impact of perennial crop seed production systems produced in Minnesota and the effect they have on soil erosion, surface water quality, and wildlife habitat. And so, Mr. Chair, that's essentially my prepared remarks for you today. And as Mr. Johnson, or Senator Johnson said, this is something that's been brought many bienniums, like Northern Crops earlier for Senator Kupek. So thank you for your time, Mr. Chair and members.
Thank you, Mr. Clevin. Members, Senator Kunish.
Thank you so much. My question is, who are the Minnesota Turf Seed Council? Who are they made up of?
Mr. Clavin?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Senator Kunish, it'd be the grass seed producers, and then the businesses. There's 3 of them. I failed to mention that earlier. 3 of them do seed cleaning in seed cleaning plants.
So these would go to individual companies or businesses?
Yes and no. The research is done is with the University of Minnesota. So the grant goes through the Department of Ag Turf Seed Council. The research is done with the University of Minnesota researchers up there.
Great.
And we have talked a little bit about, and I am Dr. Senator Seeberg about this, about becoming formally part of Forever Green in that package, because they're essentially there, and they do share resources up there. And the long-term impact on the research staff is something of concern to the council.
Senator Kunish.
So do these businesses, do they have skin in the game? Do they contribute dollars towards these things also?
Mr. Clavin.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, Senator Kunish, I'll have to send something to you on that particular question. I'm sure they do, but the extent of it, I don't know.
Okay, I would really like to learn a little bit more about that.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Kunish, what do you mean precisely by skin in the game on that? Because I know that they do use some of their equipment and knowledge and effort. Some of their teams participate in the research labor itself as well, too. And a lot of these grants are covering the cost of that. But what is it that you mean by skin in the game on that?
Senator Kunish.
Sure. So if the state is allocating dollars to this grant with taxpayers' money, and they are using the University of Minnesota's research folks, the result of this is what I'm assuming the result of this is some kind of seed variety that comes out of it. And this is something that those businesses then might benefit from. And so I'm wondering if they are contributing to the research, the cost of the research.
Mr. Clavin.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as I said, Senator Kunish, I'll have to get to the experts on that. I think in the larger part in here, and you see this in this committee here, for example, we have the Corn Research Promotion Council, the wheat, soybean, and all of those partner with the U of M to develop varieties. When it comes to corn and soybeans, the major seed companies have private labels for wheat and barley, and in this case, we rely on the University of Minnesota and have for decades, simply because they're smaller markets than what you'd see nationwide, for example, in corn.
Mm-hmm.
Senator Kunish.
And then just one question. So when a seed variety is developed, who gets the proceeds? I'm not sure exactly how to say this, but if a seed variety is developed, who owns the license, or who owns that seed variety, and who gets the does it then become exclusive rights of the University of Minnesota or these other companies, and then who gets the proceeds for that exclusivity?
Mr. Clavin.
Sure, Mr. Chairman, I'll take a stab at that as well, Senator Kunish. My guess is it's going to be the U of M because they develop the varieties. In other areas I've worked in, they do. I think you're going to have folks up here from the U later on, and maybe if they could fill that in. But I know I've worked on turkey contracts for Turkey Research and Promotion Council. The person that develops the vaccine or the gut health or whatever they're working on, that stays with the U of M as far as I know.
Mr. Clavin, if it's helpful for you, if it's affirming in any way, Dean Burr was nodding his head as you were speaking.
I could feel that, Mr. Chairman, so thanks for clarifying that.
Okay, that answered my question. Thank you.
Senator Seeberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Johnson, I absolutely support funding for Minnesota Turf Seed, Forever Green. Yes, let's talk. You know, I love that program. And there's a lot of really great programs that we fund here through the state legislature. My question is this. It sounds like, and you've carried this bill before, is that right, Senator Johnson?
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's Senator Seeberger. That's true.
Senator Seeberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And was it funded in the last biennium and the biennium prior to that?
Senator Johnson.
Senator Chair, yes. It has been funded on an annual or on a biennial basis, Senator Seeberger.
And, Mr. Chair?
Senator Seeberger.
And so is this part of the spending that the Democrats did that broke Minnesota's budget? As you posted on Facebook 5 days ago, I've outed myself now as sort of a Facebook addict. But is this part of the Democrat spending then that broke Minnesota's budget?
Senator Johnson.
Senator Putnam, our Chair Putnam, Senator Seeberger. No, I think this is one of those bread and butter issues where we have a land grant institution that's really asked to do the research that will help the economy of Minnesota. I think some of the things that really broke Minnesota from the Democrat side of things we're probably, expanding health insurance to illegal immigrants, doing some of the things within the paid family medical leave space where all of a sudden we've created a new bureaucracy of over 400 people to work in that, which is going to cost the state tens of millions of dollars going forward. I think some of it too, if you look at the nonprofits that were funded at the tune of over $1 billion going forward, Senator Seeberger, I think some of those things are a relatively large issue. I mean, we could go down, we had $18 billion of surplus, if members remember this, that was spent. We went from a $52 billion budget to a $72 billion budget in the state. When Republicans had some control in the Senate, we had a surplus of $18 billion. Democrats got full control, and they spent that down. And then they raised taxes on top of it.
Senator Johnson, I'm going to ask us to sort of keep our focus in the ag land. I know that Senator Seeberger's question didn't head us in that direction, but I'm going to ask to keep a slight focus on that if we could, please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I was just trying to answer her question on what she thought was the Democrat spending that really broke Minnesota. And so I think something like this where you have a simple research project, Senator Seeberger, people expect that, but they don't expect money going out the door to things like fraud, waste, and abuse. And unfortunately, Senator Seeberger, I don't think that's something that's been taken care of over the last 2 years. Appreciate the question.
Senator Seeberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate that clarification since the Facebook post simply states that Democrats broke the budget, and here we were talking about funding that you've sought year after year and biennium after biennium. So I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Members, further questions about agriculture? Senator Westrom.
Well, Mr. Chair, I was just going to say Senator Seeberger asked the question, so I don't think Senator Johnson was at all out of line letting her know the difference between what she thinks might be wasteful spending in agriculture and what Republicans talk about as wasteful spending. And Senator Johnson did a nice job of reminding us what some of that wasteful spending was, because some of these bread and butter core issues of the ag budget has barely changed over the years. And if you saw the bill before Senator Johnson, I think the breeders' dollars have been the same when I was ag chair back just a few years ago and the whole time I was chair. And so these are responsible groups that actually don't come in and ask for large increases even in many cases. And so I just hope Senator Seeberger can look at that as some of the differences between what our state core issues are versus funding for illegal immigrants with health care and other benefits. That's a big difference. So she brought it up, Mr. Chair, so I think all's fair.
Point taken, Senator Westrom, but I will add as well that our ag budget in 2023 was significantly larger than prior ag budgets had been. So to a certain extent, I think Senator Seeberger has a solid point to say that we did spend a great deal more on ag in 2023 than we had in prior years. But again, I'm just trying to make sure that our conversation keeps focused on agricultural-related concerns. That's my agenda. But point taken, Senator Westrom, I understand that. And folks, do we have any final questions or comments for Senator Johnson or his testifier? All right, final statement, Senator Johnson? Not final statement, but closing comments.
I'll keep it brief, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the opportunity to do this. Really appreciate the funding that we've had over the last 9 years that I've been part of this as well, and we can see the outcomes of this with the research and the types of varieties that have come out of that. It's not just been white papers, but actual product coming out. So appreciate the opportunity to display this product.
So, thanks, folks. So Senate File 2137 will be laid over for possible inclusion. Okay, folks, that's the last of the bills. By and large, we did a pretty good job today, folks. Coming up next, however, we have a presentation from the University of Minnesota. President Cunningham is not here. So we're going to start with some other folks. Dean Burr, if you would please, our friends from the University of Minnesota, if you would please come to the table, state your full name for the record, commence your testimony when you're ready, and note that we have about 25 minutes.
Mr. Chair, thank you very much for the opportunity. We appreciate the chance to present today on the agricultural components of the region's budget request. For the record, I am Shashank Priya, Vice President for Research and Innovation at the University of Minnesota. Today, I will be sharing how we plan to position Minnesota as a leader in biomanufacturing through the state investment. Later today, CFAN's Dean Brian Burr, sitting on my left, will provide further details on other key requests, including those supporting our agricultural and natural resource initiatives, such as precision agriculture, the Farm Initiative, and the HEAPR projects. The university's Board of Regents took a new approach this year, submitting the full request in the first year and providing greater detail on the specific funding areas. One key component of this approach is what we have been calling the research bucket, which includes biomanufacturing and precision agriculture. As part of our broader push to advance the innovation and new technologies, we are requesting $10 million in recurring funding for each of biomanufacturing and precision agriculture areas. These investments are included in SF 2362, which represents the university's full biennium budget request. Our goal here in this next slide, our goal is to leverage Minnesota's unique strengths to transform the state into a national bioeconomy innovation hub. Biomanufacturing is an area of immense opportunity. Minnesota has long been a leader in agricultural and food production. Now we have opportunity to build on this strength by transforming agricultural feedstocks into foundation of a new bioeconomy. Biomanufacturing leverages agricultural products such as corn, soybean, specialty crops, and forestry residues as raw materials to produce sustainable fuels, bioplastics, fertilizers, fuel cells, pharmaceuticals, and other materials. And because this conversion occurs using microbes or bioorganisms, there is no residual waste left behind, as in the traditional production processes. This is transformative. It provides a cleaner, a smaller environmental footprint, and produces a much higher yield in the production. Currently, most biomanufacturing facilities are concentrated on the coasts, East and West Coast. Minnesota has a unique opportunity in the middle to lead a new Midwestern bioeconomy, positioning the state at the forefront of the innovation and revolution occurring across the world. To make this vision a reality, we seek state support to launch a new facility which will be focused on three things: modeling and computational simulation tools that will allow us to design the microbes that will lead to the production of various kinds of products, experimentation to validate it from the test tube, few grams to kilograms stages, and innovation through fermentation cycles that can go all the way to 750 liters to a 1,000-liter production facility. This facility will drive research, discovery, and scaling that will allow us to transition these things to our companies in Minnesota. And it will allow us to supplement and beautiful research ongoing on our campus. In practical terms, we will be scaling biomanufacturing from hundreds to eventually thousands of liters, and we will provide our corporate partners such as Cargill, General Mills, Syngenta, etc., an opportunity to develop new products that will make a great economic and social impact on the state of Minnesota. This investment is not just in technology, it's also about people. Minnesota needs a workforce that is trained in biomanufacturing, biotechnology, and precision agriculture. With this facility, the university will play a critical role in educating and training the current and next generation of scientists, engineers, and technicians, ensuring that Minnesota companies have the skilled workforce they need to compete in this rapidly growing sector. By partnering with industry, state agencies, and community colleges, we will provide hands-on learning opportunities, internships, and training programs to develop and upscale a talent pipeline that will keep high-paying jobs in Minnesota and attract new businesses to the state. With state investment, this will mark the first phase of revitalizing and reinvesting in our St. Paul campus ensuring Minnesota takes a leadership role and the bioeconomy is transformed in the St. Paul campus. We are terming it as BioCity. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'll welcome any questions on this topic. With that, I'll move on to Dean Burr.
Thank you. Feel free to continue with Dean Burr. Please state your full name for the record, and we'll get to questions when you guys are all done.
Thank you, Chair Putnam. I'm Brian Boer. I'm Dean of the College of Food, Agricultural, and Natural Resource Sciences at the University of Minnesota. Thank you for the invitation today to visit about a bold vision we have called FARM that some of you have likely heard of. And I'll talk through this relatively quickly, but I wanted to start with the need for FARM, and this is a kind of a startling statistic, but the U.S. Has 140 million acres of land that we've lost over the last 40 years, and I think of 40-year increments because that's sort of the lifetime of a farmer on the land. So in the lifetimes of many of our farmers today, that's the land we've lost. It's to construction, to erosion, to drought, for example, areas we can't farm anymore. And in Minnesota, we currently have 19.35 million acres of farmland in Minnesota. That equivalent number is 7 Minnesota's farmland lost in the U.S. So when we think about innovating in agriculture and food systems, it's a matter of how are we going to produce the food that we need to sustain, of course, a growing population and the nutritional needs, and preserve and protect our land. So FARM, in a nutshell, is an attempt to try to take advanced agricultural research and address those goals while preserving and protecting the environment at the same time. So it is a bold vision. It's something that I think all farmers and all of society wants to have occur. We're taking the lead on this in Minnesota to try to accomplish that on fewer and fewer land and less water use and so on in that process, which we've been doing for many years. But as Dr. Priya was describing, the innovations that are occurring in biology and technology are really enabling us to think differently and really advance that quite a ways. And one of our goals in this always is how do we help to de-risk this for farmers as they're making their investments, and then how do we bring those products to market? So Forever Green came up, for example, in this conversation. That's a great example of thinking about how do we preserve and protect water, how to enhance new products, create sustainable aviation fuel, and bring a greater economy to farmers as an example of the kind of work we do. The grass seed conversation is exactly that as well. How do we bring that innovation to production, grow our economies, and so on? FARM's bold vision, as I said here, it's exactly that. Can we create healthier food, create bioproducts and bioinnovation from that? I think of agriculture as the original bioeconomy. It really is the original bioeconomy. And we're advancing that to new heights. And I'll talk more through some of these images that are here now. I just wanted to give a sense that a key part of this is the ecology of agriculture. How do we advance this in a way that is consistent with our environmental outcomes and goals? And that little diagram on the right is from some of our pre-design. That is just demonstrating this is an innovative place that actually mimics today's agricultural systems. So it's asking farmers to be more productive, more efficient, and more profitable in their work and helping to assist that. In terms of background on this, we often get the question, who's been involved with this? This actually started in 2014, just for some background. We move slowly sometimes. But it was around a project called Dairy Innovation Group that was formed by the legislature to look at a new dairy on the St. Paul campus. We did that research. We looked at the possibility of doing that. What we discovered is to put a viable, modern site-type dairy on the St. Paul campus in Falcon Heights, Minnesota, if you're not familiar with that is, right next to the fairgrounds, is a difficult thing to do. And to do it in a way where we could deliver feed, get manure off the land, and move it forward. And we started talking, that conversation was the origin of saying, how do we do this in a way that does replicate those aspects of farms today? How do we do that in a place where we can integrate across soils and the farm and agricultural systems and put that all together? If we need to invest, let's reinvest in that full system. And we also knew that with technology innovation, we can now understand the interactions between what's happening in water, soils, plants, animals, and that cycle that goes back. So it is a circular economy type approach. In that process, we've had over 22 workshops. We've invited more than 200 stakeholders to that. 100 have been actively participating with us, and that includes everything from farmers to agribusinesses to other universities to other faculty across the college. So very broad conversations and input about this have been terrific for helping us to shape this to be relevant. We've acquired 1,360 acres now in Mower County. The site for this is just north of Austin. If we're between Blooming Prairie and Austin on 218, it's roughly in that neighborhood. Give you some sense of where it is. And that was acquired with support of the University of Minnesota and some of our assets here to do that work. So we are in the process of moving that forward. And we do have an oversight committee there that's working on it, as well as these advisory committees beyond that working towards this. This was just codifying a bit of a comment I made before. This truly is, and this is something we've really struggled with, I think, in agricultural systems. It's complex to think about the environment, water, soils, and plants are the ultimate, derivation of energy. They're the solar cells that we rely on to get food energy and other energies into our systems across the board. And those interactions with animals then. And we're starting to understand the interactions of, for example, as Dr. Priya was talking about, the microbes and microorganisms in the soils impact plant health dramatically. Think potato famine is an example of where, soil microbes had a real impact on plants in a big way. But now we're finding we can use those microorganisms to improve the health of plants as well. There's, just like you have in your gut microbiome, there's healthy bacterium and there's harmful. And we're trying to develop ways to do that without using commercial and chemical fertilizers, but to do that within the biosystem to do that work. And we're having success actually in potatoes. We've developed a form of we found that some bacteria were battling with the bad bacteria and we're able to reduce leaf blight with no chemicals whatsoever. And that's turned into a new firm that's with the University of Minnesota doing that work. Of course, healthy plants lead to healthy animals. We don't think about it much, but mycotoxins are an organism that gets into corn. When you feed that to livestock, it kills livestock. And how can we control those types of things, really think about that system in doing it. And then the really exciting part is, and I'll talk about this later with regard to one of our HEPA requests in food science, we're actually looking at precision nutrition. So ultimately we're about human nutrition, and we're starting to understand how the microbiome, when I was talking about your own gut microbiome, how the health of that impacts your health, and we're able to understand how that's affected by the food you're eating. And a great example is, for example, with our Somali community in the Twin Cities, eats a high fermented foods diet in many cases and have a very healthy biome because of that. As they move to Western diets, it influences their health outcomes. So we have been doing research on precision of what is that aspect of fermented foods that so many societies lived on for centuries to try to preserve and protect food. How does that improve health? So we're thinking about those and being able to cycle that entire place through that. So that gives you that's the big picture of it. To get a little bit more brief on this, it does, as you can tell from this, create a vibrant research ecosystem as we think about it. We are partnering with Riverland Community College that's in Austin, Minnesota. We're partnering with other two-year colleges in general in our work. We're partnering, of course, the University of Minnesota, Hormel Institute, which is a partnership with the University of Minnesota to work with them on some of these nutrition and health outcomes. Working with several other campuses, K-12, 4-H, FFA, we see this as a great opportunity for outreach and engagement in that community as well as part of that process. Teaching and education, we have this set up as a both on-site piece, but one of the exciting things is right now, for example, when we're doing research in our livestock facilities, we don't tend to allow general public in there because of issues of avian influenza, for example, or swine health issues. So we're going to have fully digital ways to deliver educational programming as far as we want to related to what's happening on farm as part of this process. And we are looking at it as a full spectrum. Again, in all of this, we're looking at integrating across from K-12 education, getting young people excited and interested in the technology and innovation in food systems, and taking that all the way through, two-year degrees for technical degrees. We hear from our equipment manufacturers all the time. They need people who can manage and operate and work with that equipment that's high-tech and innovative. Those are our two-year schools. We talk all the time about the need for our undergraduates and bachelor's degrees working out in the field with farmers to help them with their agronomic work. There's shortages there. We look at the PhDs that do the work that develop things like new grass seed varieties, since that was here before. So we look at that full spectrum of education and really opening that up. I've talked quite a lot about the research enterprise that's going on here, and it does go from the absolute foundations of natural resources and water all the way through up to human health and nutrition, which is really how agriculture generally affects us overall. In the context of the University of Minnesota, it's one of those things I think we sometimes take for granted. We're one of the very few integrated universities across the country. We have everything from the medical school that's looking at some of the issues I'm talking about in human health and nutrition, all the way back to our natural resources and the foundations of water and soils and health there. And we have everything in agriculture in between. So we have an opportunity as a state to really lead the nation and actually globally. When we looked at doing this, we've looked around to find places that might have something like this. They aren't there. The technology and innovation, robotics and data sciences and precision agriculture are there to do this work. We're at a stage where our facilities on the St. Paul campus are at a condition where they're basically 78% poor and critical. We are taking our production, particularly animal ag systems, offline. Our turkey research, we no longer have a production turkey research facility. Our beef facility is mothballed at Rosemount because of water pipes from the county there that are extraordinarily expensive to replace to supply water for a cattle feedlot. Cows drink a lot of water. And so we're facing those challenges. We're literally moving out of this, and we have a chance because we haven't invested for so long. I see it as an opportunity to make this kind of a leapfrog. Let's do this as a system up to our technologies today. Let's bring that in place and work on that. So we have those strengths. We should build on them. This sounds big to a lot of people. Every day in my world, we operate 10 research and outreach centers across the state of Minnesota to serve the different climatic and soil conditions of Minnesota and agriculture. We, of course, operate within the St. Paul campus. This becomes part of that ecosystem. Right now, we operate 5 different sites, and as you can imagine, when you're doing 5 different sites, it's very inefficient from the standpoint of repetitive labor that you have in those sites for the things like, hauling manure, hauling crops, driving tractors, that sort of thing. To bring some of this work in animal agriculture to a single site allows us to integrate that work and cost efficiencies as well. And we see it actually being a hub, and not necessarily a hub, the St. Paul campus of the Bioinnovation Bioeconomy is really critical to get that core science and bring that out into the world so it can be used by farmers and it become part of their system that improves the things I've been talking about. So we really do have this system that we operate quite a bit, and I'm convinced we'll be capable of doing this one as well. Public-private partnerships, just quickly, we work extensively always. I refer back to the presentation earlier because it's kind of an example of how we work with regular farmers. We work with communities on community water systems, for example, on soils and health. We work across tribal nations on our work in forestry and other food areas. We work very broadly across that, and we continue to work on areas where we can support those private-public partnerships that are critical. Just a bit of the site to give you a sense of it, of what it is. This is the site in Mower County, the river running through that. That's the Cedar River. For context, the Cedar River is a river of interest for example, Nature Conservancy, the Environmental Defense Fund, and so on, because it runs through a lot of agricultural land from Minnesota, its headwaters through Iowa into the Mississippi. Of course, the Mississippi is a river of interest. We do look at this as our goal is, can we reduce and eliminate the environmental footprint by cycling our nutrients, our water, our crop systems through that system so you can actually create a net zero footprint across carbon, across water, across the environment, atmospheric pressure. So this is an intensively engineered site to do that work. And so the river there is actually part of that process of can we actually show how we can demonstrate to improve that across a large section of what represents the breadbasket of the U.S. And we'd be the place leading that at the peak of the Mississippi River that offers some really exciting opportunities. That's why in this, when you look at it, a lot of this is ecological engineering. A lot of it is how do we keep that water on the landscape? How do we filter that water? How do we use it multiple times? How do we ensure that those nutrients aren't running off that are valuable for farmers? They're not running off and down the river or down the drain as we speak about it. So we're really committed to trying to do and advance that work. Where we're at right now, we have the pre-design completed. That was completed in March. We're just rolling that out. I have not read the whole thing yet. It's 750 some pages of engineering details and economics, but we are at that stage. We're ready to roll it out to that step. We're ready to start to build. We do have a request in the capital request for $20 million as part of the University of Minnesota's broader $200+ million request. And that's for the design stage, this next stage of taking it to that next step of putting it on the ground before we go to a construction and build. We'll still be doing some continuing consultation there. And we're working heavily at one of the things we learned, and this is Dr. Perea's conversation again, we have a huge opportunity, and we're looking at it as the farm site. You get focused on that because that's your focal point. And now we're looking at how do we bring that into the St. Paul campus so that we can bring the technology and innovations happening there and the University of Minnesota in general, and really looking at that as this final step of integrating that. I apologize if I'm running over time, so I'll check my watch, but I'll move very quickly.
Thank you, Dean Warren. I think that we have about 5 minutes left for questions. Is that okay? Is this a good time to?
Can I quick flip to the food science?
Absolutely.
Quickly,
Sure.
because that's a key request in the HEPA request. Thank you, Chair Putnam. Sure. So you get an idea of the precision ag. I can skip through that. But food science, nutrition, and this is just a great example of the University of Minnesota's impact. This is a snapshot overhead of the pilot plant that's at the University of Minnesota. It's fundamentally looking at how do we take agricultural products and of course everything gets upscaled into food for people. It's launched literally industries in Minnesota. I'll talk that in a smaller scale here shortly. But the investment we're looking for here is to revitalize the food science nutrition pilot plant. Right now it's in a condition where from an HVAC and electrical perspective are the two key issues. They're just substandard. For example, we still are doing cheese manufacturing, but the electrical server for that, the power outlets and so on, don't meet many of the codes. So we bring in some portable adapter. I'm not an electrician, so I don't understand the technology of it, to step that down so they can do that work. It doesn't meet food safety protocols now with some of the materials that are used in the ceiling and so on. And the HVAC system is insufficient to clear out the air that we need to keep organisms out of that system. It's just gotten to the point where that's collapsing. We do resident teaching and research there. And if you haven't been there, I always have to plug in for our award-winning blue cheese and our other dairy products and ice cream that come out of the plant. And I will point out, we do have partnerships again with this. In fact, during COVID is a pretty good example. We opened up the pilot plant during COVID so that General Mills and other companies who were not able to get into some of their plants had to substitute ingredients. Because if you recall, we weren't able to get some ingredients into the supply chains. We were actually trying to reformulate products for them to try to help move their products into the marketplace during COVID is an example of that, the work it does. We work with Agriculture Utilization Research Institute that many are familiar with. We're partners, co-partners with them, so they're part of the investment and work that goes into the plant with them. And we're the Midwest Dairy Food Center Research Center, which supports our dairy product industries. Startup-wise, a couple of new exciting ones is New Tech Biosciences. And if you haven't heard of them, we do work in issues of plant-based proteins and meat products. That firm is taking plants and actually using them as a medium to create what amounts to animal cell type cultures from plants-derived feed into those, which is pretty interesting innovation. There were 2 graduate students graduated working in our pilot plant that opened that plant, and now we're creating jobs and new businesses in Minnesota. On a smaller scale, Redhead Creamery, some of you may be familiar with them. They're out in Broughton, Minnesota. Elise and Lucas Jennison, students at the University of Minnesota. Elise went to the pilot plant when she was a student, said she wanted to become an artisan cheese maker. I was just out there visiting a month or so ago, see them fairly regularly. Just a fantastic story of young people developing an entrepreneurial place by doing those types of tests. So that's the work that we do that. So appreciate your lenience, Senator Putnam, but wanted to give people notice of that.
Thank you, Dean Burr, for your thorough but efficient presentation. Members, do you see any questions? Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a question. I just want to just thank you for your presentation here and all the work that you've been doing on this for years. And it's been a pleasure working with you. You've come, as you said, 22 workshop events, but I know you've done a lot more of that because you've been personally met with me in Austin, and the work of acquiring the land and working through that process and meeting with local governments, townships, all those things, and doing it pretty smoothly. It's a very important project, and the support is huge in the area. And I know that was the one of the public meetings we had, or that you had, and that was one of the biggest meetings I had been to. So definitely the professionalism and your partnerings with the communities, Hormel Institute, Riverland, and just all the things you're doing. Just thank you for that, and we continue to look forward to the progress you're going to make as this project continues. So again, and to your team, all the people that are involved in this. So thank you so much. We do appreciate it.
Senator Westrom.
Mr. Chair, Dean, can you offer some insight just as you propose and move forward with the farm project? How is that going to replace or substitute the other outreach centers that we have scattered across the state already with infrastructure? How do you see those two things working together?
Dean Gore.
Chair Putnam, Senator Westrom, thank you for that question. Yeah, so one clear intention is we intend to keep all of our ROC centers in place. And the reason for that is, as I said, they're locationally, they're unique in the state. We have to adapt technologies, innovation, crop systems to those regions. We do have livestock centers there. That's the place, of course, that's closest linked to this. Those we will be taking some of those livestock systems offline. In particular, the one in West Central Research Outreach Center, the tremendously successful organic dairy there, we're going to keep that on West Central Research and Outreach Center because of that work that's going on there. We actually have requests at the university for projects to improve and upgrade some of those facilities because we don't want to restart an organic dairy that we have the data on for, again, years to do that. So it's that consistent piece of data. We would eventually, so for example, I think about Southern Research Outreach Center in Waseca, which now is our swine enterprise. As we're doing farm, this isn't a helicopter drop. So some of this planning is, for example, we'll start off with a phase, and turkey is our first priority on farm to get that in place. We will not replace the swine facility likely until, as we go down that phase, until the swine facility that's in Waseca is no longer, usable in that context. We do have plans to phase those in. A big part of those, again, are cost efficiencies on this. As we're doing those things, we're thinking about that as well. So we do have plans for this to be a part of that system, not to, I think you used the word replace perhaps or something like that. It's not to replace them. It's to complement those and to put it in a piece where we have this sort of integrated cycle that we don't have anywhere else.
Senator Westrom.
So, Mr. Chair, so do you see, it sounds like from your answer, probably some changing of each research center. Waseca, you mentioned with hogs. And I guess ultimately, how does that work with the budget? Because I know at times you're constrained and confined with budgets. And
right.
And I mean, are we just kicking that decision down the road and it's really going to come about in 5 or 10 years after a farm is built? Or is there a plan or a path that keeps the research centers viable that already have the infrastructure in place, as opposed to, once farm is moving forward, assuming it does and continues? How does that work on the budgets, I guess? Because it seems like if you're adding, something's maybe going to have to be taken off, but you're also adding new stuff where you've got infrastructure already. How do we balance that?
Dean Boer.
Yeah, Senator Putnam, Senator Westrom, that is the key challenge for the university in general, right? And one of our challenges is, I see this as a decision of do we do animal ag research or not in some ways. We do have public-private partnerships. We are working with philanthropy. We have raised a significant amount of funding to do this. We're currently working on the financial models for farm to be able to sustain that and have that work. We have the same challenges with our other ROCs. So in terms of, and one of the elements that has happened over the last, I have the data on this that I was presenting to the House Ag Committee recently. I'll get the numbers wrong, but we're about, in terms of real dollars, we're about $150 million less funding for agricultural research than we had just 20 years ago, adjusted for that. So we are looking for public-private partnerships. We're looking for a model, obviously, on these models as we do other research outreach centers. We sell the crops and so on as part of that. The philanthropy and, of course, the state support of this is a key part of that as well, and looking for that investment.
Senator Westrom.
Lastly, Mr. Chair, so just to your earlier answer, and it sounds like you've had a lot of discussions on the other outreach centers. Is that your position at this point, or has it been a regent and a board and president discussion? And is that the plan as far as how the other outreach centers interplay with farm, or what level of is that decision been discussed and confirmed?
Dean Boer.
Senator Putnam, Senator Westrom. I won't speak for the president of the Board of Regents, but every time I give this presentation I'm giving to you right now, this conversation we're having is exactly the conversation I have with them. And it's one of those things that I look at the changes we're observing with regard to weather patterns in Minnesota over the years now. Those research and outreach centers, I'll say it until I'm blue in the face, are irreplaceable assets for Minnesota. We have over 100 years of data on what's happened in Minnesota related to our agricultural lands that goes into how we develop new technologies. We have to have those sites there to be able to maintain that work. We will lose that work. Now, there's going to be decisions made by others that may impact that, but I've been clear about that with our president, with the Board of Regents, anybody who will listen to me. I try to make sure that we recognize that that information over those years is really valuable as we're trying to adapt to these changes in our land availability, to changes in weather patterns, to changes in water issues. It's critical for the state of Minnesota. So I will tell everybody that same story, Senator Westrom.
Chair Putnam, can I add a comment to it? So as Brian, as Dean Burr mentioned, that there's an oversight committee at the university level, And that oversight committee is doing the planning exercise and actually going through this discussion exactly. And we are hoping to give a Board of Regents presentation in about few months. So we gave a very broad overview presentation on farm to the Board of Regents about a month ago with Dean Boer. And now we are diving deeper since the pre-designed report is available. And hopefully in 3-4 months, we'll be ready to go back to the Board of Regents to present this scenario of how everything can be integrated together, including St. Paul campus. Yeah.
Senator Dames.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation today. We truly do appreciate it. And thank you, Dean Boer, for all the work you do for agriculture, but not only agriculture, all the work you do at the St. Paul campus to keep that as a campus that students want to attend and keep it competitive. We truly appreciate it. And I know a lot of times all your work you do goes unnoticed, but keep up the good work, and we do appreciate it. Thank you.
Senator Kunish.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dean, you said there are other people making decisions, and that made me think about the recent cuts to agriculture from the federal level. There were over $1 billion that were cut from food, from farm to school, for childcare organizations, all of those sort of things. And so my question for you is, how much of your research do you rely on governmental grants or federal level support? And how, are you nervous? Are you apprehensive? What is your thought about what the future holds for agriculture research in Minnesota based on federal support or non-support? And can our University of Minnesota system continue to perform their agricultural programming without that federal support?
Dean Boer.
Chair Putnam, Senator Kunish, thank you for that question. We are concerned, of course, about the federal funding. And for context on our federal funding, the federal government, we actually have a federal direct line that's through the Agricultural Experiment Station, as well as for extension. That's a part of the Farm Bill, essentially. There's 2 acts within that provide funding. That has declined dramatically over the last several years. In fact, 20 years ago, you would find that the U.S. was the largest investment, as a government, was the largest investor in agricultural research globally. Now, China has surpassed us by double, almost, in that. Ours has gone down over time. And so we've been on that aspect. And so that is a concern. I will also recognize the state of Minnesota partners with the federal government in that. It's actually part of the original founding of the University of Minnesota and other public universities like that, was to have that shared investment in both from the federal government, and then the states were to also invest. So we appreciate that the state has been a tremendous supporter as well. But I am greatly concerned because we also write grants to the federal government, as Dr. Priya, as a vice president for RIO, our Research Innovation Office, recognizes broadly. That's NIH, NSF, which we also get grants from. So when I talk about our food science and nutrition programs, and I in particular, I mean, a lot of the work we do in agriculture I see as food assistance for people, because if we do a good job at providing food, we're providing nutritious food and quantities of food, you lower the cost, people can afford more food. But we're very concerned about our ability to maintain, in the face of some of these challenges, those projects based on that because of NIH, NSF, and other funding sources. So we are concerned with that. It will have substantial impacts. At the same time, we're fortunate that we have these partnerships that are with the private sector. We work with other universities frequently. We work with government. We work with the USDA. We work with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. Has been a tremendous partner for us over the years. So we have many partnerships that we rely on. So we have a diversified portfolio. Still, if you take that federal, leg out from under the table, that's a challenge. So we're very concerned.
Yeah. Thank you, Senator Kunish. Folks, we are over time. So thank you very much, both of you, for representing the U to us today and telling us a little bit more. Every time I hear about farm, it sounds cooler. So I'm optimistic that it's something that can happen and we can come down and see it soon. Members, coming up, Monday is Sovereignty Day. So we will not be having a full hearing. Instead, we're going to meet at 3:30, most likely in a separate room. Expect an email with real details. We will hear a presentation about Indigenous folks' participation in the military. That is a Vets Day for us. and then we'll hear one bill that is relevant to those issues as well. So there being no further business in front of the committee, we are now adjourned.